I should rather target the top 20% defaulters first.
Yeah.
Now, on a map, can I see where those defaulters are? Can I do a simple route management or a logistics management simulation to help my field inspector or tax collector to follow a least cost path to collect as much as possible? So that is the technology angle to it.
Hello and welcome to the U20 Dialogue series. I am your host Punit Gandhi from NIUA, and we are excited to bring to you a series of discussions on various urban development challenges faced by cities across the world and its potential solutions. This month we will talk to experts working in the urban sector on the theme of accelerating climate finance in cities.
And today we have with us Amarsh Chaturvedi. He is the co-founder and director at Transav Technologies. He will help us in understanding the future of municipal revenue. Welcome to the show, Amarsh.
Thanks a lot, Puneet. Such a pleasure to be here.
So let's start our conversation with understanding about municipal revenue. What are the different ways that any municipal corporation can generate a revenue?
Sure. Very pertinent question. More so in these challenging times where the municipalities and the city administrations are really struggling with a double whammy of providing citizen services and also fighting the pandemic. So essentially, municipal bodies in India are dependent on a multitude of sources funds to carry out their operations and also to bring about infrastructure development and changes gradually over time. Most of these sources are typically confined to the central and state allocated funds, which are essentially grants, aids, etc., which come to the cities. A third and a very important source of the funds is municipalities' own tax collection, own revenue. Now, why I say that it is most important is because with the changing priorities of the governments, with the changing allocations year on year, depending on the overall macroeconomic scenario, the focus on providing grant and aid to the municipalities can vary year on year. However, gradually with the requirements of the citizens, with the aim of providing better citizen services, cities need to focus on a continuous pipeline of projects, on continuous pipeline of better citizen services the longer run. And for that, they need to focus on something which is very much in their control. And municipalities' own revenues is something which is quite underexplored by Indian cities. That is very unfortunate, but that is something that can be brought in their control. And why I say that is essentially one of the largest sources of revenue for a municipal body in the country is property tax revenue. It is essentially a tax on the built-up environment, on the buildings which are existing in the city, on the real estate. And that is a finite amount, that is a huge amount that a city has. And when it translates to money, if realized properly and accurately, it is a major source of chunk of funds coming into the municipalities. And hence, we believe that municipal bodies, if they want to focus on the revenues, apart from the other minor sources like, say, water tax, garbage cess, etc., which are directly linked to services, property tax in itself is a huge chunk which cities can focus to improve their fortunes.
Okay. And there are two parts to this revenue as well. One is the tax collection that comes from property tax, which is a major component almost in all municipalities. Apart from that, what other kind of revenues are also there? If you can just give a brief on that line as well.
Sure. So apart from property tax, there is a multitude of services which typically the municipal bodies provide to the citizens. Some cities prefer charging a bill or an invoice just like a utility bill to the citizens. Whereas in many of the cities in the country, there is still a flat fee or a flat tax, of course, dependent on various slabs, which essentially is levied on a citizen to charge for those services. And some of these services include solid waste management, water utilities, usage of common public spaces, like, for example, mela grounds or municipal halls, wedding halls, banquet halls, etc. So these are like common public facilities which from time to time could be let out for the users, for which the cities can levy these taxes. Apart from this, a lot of cities in our country also own a large chunk of large chunk of real estate, which is typically in the form of parking lots, shops in municipal markets, vegetable markets, etc. And these are typically let out to small-time vendors and small shopkeepers, etc., which typically who are required to pay back to the municipality for these.
Okay. So there are quite a lot of avenues which do come in, but eventually the majority of the chunk will come from property tax. And reports do say in India we hardly collect 1% of GDP. That is the municipal revenue, right?
Right. I'll come to the details of why this figure is very low. But yes, property tax, in my opinion, is a missed opportunity. Cities could have done much better had they worked proactively on property tax demand as well as collection.
Okay. So can you just give us a brief idea about how does your company help in developing that ecosystem?
Sure. So before that, let me step a little back and tell you how cities gradually over the years have embraced technology to reach where they are currently. Earlier, when we talk about property tax systems, these were typically hard copy driven systems in which property tax demand registers and the collections were maintained in hard copy records. Over the last 20 years, we have seen a wave of e-governance and massive digitization of our government processes happening. And as part of that wave, the cities have also undergone a massive revolution in which they have embraced e-governance solutions or digital solutions to manage their property tax system. Now, what has happened is when they transformed from a hard copy or a paper-based system to a digital system, there was a massive shift in or massive improvement in the efficiency of tax collection. Why? Because they were in real time able to identify the gaps in the collection. They were able to find out which properties are not paying to these municipal bodies on time and which owners need to be approached proactively for the collection process. They were also able to create strategies around the collection process, and this digital exercise definitely helped them a lot in improving the collection side of property taxes. Now, a gap still remains, even though with this wave of digitization, a gap still remains, and that gap is primarily on the demand side. And why I say that is because when this wave of digitization happened, the hard copy records were digitized into the digital copies as is. I mean, there was no intelligence added on top of it. There was no validation. There was no upgrade of these data sets which happened. It was the hard copy records were just made into digital copies. And what the city misses here in this process is essentially a huge chunk of underassessed and unassessed revenue. And I'll come to that in detail what exactly means. Essentially, the cities unfortunately are carrying the legacy of outdated data even in the digital formats or even in the e-government solutions. Now, coming to the underassessed and unassessed properties, essentially what happens typically in the cities is India has seen a huge urban growth, not just in the peripheral areas of the cities, even in the core areas. We have seen a lot of redevelopment happening. Old houses have been taken off. There are new buildings, new apartment complexes which have come up. But these changes, unfortunately, do not reflect in the property tax demand registers. And these changes are typically of two types, wherein the new property might not be registered in the property tax records at all. And these typically are called the unassessed properties. Then there is a second category of properties which might be grossly underestimated in terms of area or wrongly recorded as in terms of its usage. So, for example, commercially used property might be recorded as a residential unit in the property tax database. In both these scenarios, the municipality fails to accrue the true potential of property tax of that particular, and hence they are called under-assessed properties. And when it comes to estimating the demand of a property, we need to take care of these under-assessed and unassessed property cases as well. Now, what Transub does here is using machine learning and AI-based systems, we help cities triangulate discrete data sets to arrive at the correct usage of the property in its first place. So, taking into account cities' own data sets like trade license, for example. So, cities typically issue trade license to commercial properties. We take that data set. We have utility bills, electricity bills, etc., water bills, telecom bills. Using that, we get the, I won't say even that is 100% accurate, but it is much better and much more updated than the property tax database. Now, the challenge here is the way addresses are recorded in all these data sets is very different. I mean, in one data set, you would have the address or the road, street name as MG Road, whereas on the other data set, you might have it recorded as Mahatma Gandhi Road. So in all these cases, I cannot do a one-to-one match, one-to-one text match, even in amongst all these discrete data sets. And even within the municipality database, also we have seen that addresses could be recorded very differently amongst the other different departments. So hence we came up with this machine learning based system wherein we could match these addresses with fair accuracy and then come back and arrive at the correct usage of the property, thereby enlisting the properties which are wrongly assessed in terms of their usage. So this is solving the first part of the underassessment. The second part of underassessment is on the basis of area. And here I would say modern technologies based on drones and satellite images are extremely useful. So using drone data sets, we could actually arrive at the building heights, the constructed areas. We can extract all of that through machine learning based algorithms automatically. And then with the fair accuracy, we can determine the exact area which the property should report and match it against the area reported in the municipal data. So using these algorithms, we can estimate both underassessment and unassessed properties in terms of area. And if I combine all of that together, I sit at a more intelligent database of the city with a fairly accurate usage and the area statistics that could be used by the city to improve its tax demand. And if you look at the ROI, typically we have seen a jump of nearly 40 to 50% in the tax demand, which is typically charged by the cities. Now, coming back to the time of implementation and also some of the process improvements that the cities have anyway started earlier. One of these processes that the cities have typically adopted is going for a GIS-based property tax improvement system. Now, what that means is essentially cities create the base map, they appoint a vendor, which their workforce, their enumerators go door to door to collect data of every building, every unit, record the usage, measure the areas, etc. And that is a massive exercise. Most of these GIS-based property tax assessments have taken years to be implemented in a fairly large size city. So instead of going for an all-out approach and recording the data of every property in the city, why not narrow down the data set, narrow down only those properties which are found to be underassessed or unassessed based on the ML-based approach that I mentioned earlier, and only address say like 10% or 20% properties which have been grossly underestimated. So this would actually, to realize the ROI, this time frame can shrink, a lot of effort, a lot of time that is required to realize the tax potential.
Okay. So coming to one of the some of the things that you just spoke about, and one of them is unassessed or underassessed property percentage. What is a typical percentage of the area that is unassessed or underassessed in any city from your experience?
Sure. So the figure, I would say, varies from city to city, region to region.
Yeah.
And instead of assigning a number to it, I would rather like to focus on the reasons. So one of the first and foremost reasons that we have found in almost all of our studies is not the willful default. It's not that the citizens willfully are reporting wrong areas or wrong usages, etc. It's just that the mechanism for a citizen to report their areas or changes in their properties is not smooth enough. There is a massive gap in awareness as well. So, for example, if I uh, uh, give you an example from the state of Goa, when we carried out a pilot mapping of one of the commercial wards in the city, where a lot of commercial premises were there. From a lot of shops and offices, we found out that they were not aware that they had to apply for a trade license as a commercial property.
Yeah.
So this awareness gap is something that I think, even before approaching the underassessment and unassessed cases, the cities can run awareness campaigns for the citizens to know what they need to report, and also improve the process in which the citizens can report this. And here I would go back to the e-governance solution, and I would really recommend that e-governance solutions typically in the past have focused a lot on improving the internal efficiencies of the departments. The citizen facing part has been kept minimal, only for say payment purposes or e-payments or etc. There could be, citizen facing portals which could do a bit more than that. There could be portals which could essentially help the citizens on board to the platform easily, and post these awareness campaigns, citizens could latch on to those systems and report the areas and usages. This has been one of the major reasons. And the other reason always remains the willful default. I mean, that is invariably one of the major reasons in some of these cities.
Okay. And then if we are trying to do this exercise from awareness to helping cities in generating more revenue, which you said can lead to increase of around 40 to 50% of the tax demand, what is the time frame that we are looking at to complete this whole process? For I don't know, you can take the size of the city, but I'm sure it will vary, but just for reference.
Sure. So let me give you an example of a mid-sized city, say city like Indore, for example.
Yeah.
It has almost around 7.5 to 8 lakh properties.
Yeah.
If you follow an AI and ML based approach to just focus on say usage problem, under assessment in usage, it would typically take a 30-day kind of a time frame to complete or run the algorithm completely on the city, and to arrive at ward-wise lists of properties where the re-verification process would be done. So I can give you one example. We did a pilot in one of a similarly sized city, and in a zone with 3 wards where there were almost around 50,000 properties, we were able to complete this activity in 8 days. Okay. And on the 9th day, there was a list given back to the municipality that this is the list of properties where you can start the re-verification process, and you can start approaching these property owners for revised demand notices.
Okay. So that is pretty fast if all the data is in place, because I'm assuming that there would be a lot of data requirement prior to you start this 8-day process. Right. And once that is sorted, I think it becomes simple.
Yeah, you're bang on. So now data is a very interesting piece in this whole story. Yes. And when I talk to you about utility bills, etc., you would appreciate that these are very different departments. Some of these
Yes.
departments don't even come under the purview of a municipal body. So it is a little difficult to gather that data. I would say it is impossible. What we have also seen, and this is a pattern, specifically in the cities which are enlisted in the smart city list,
Yeah.
typically the SPV has representation from all these cross-functional departments.
Hmm.
And hence, to implement this in a smart city is easier compared to a city which is not a part of the smart city list.
Hmm.
And fortunately, in the Indian context, most of the prominent cities of the country are already in that list.
Yeah.
And hence, most of the unrealized revenue is also lying idle, I would say, untouched in these smart cities. So, our thought process is that since smart cities are anyway working a lot on improving the overall data infrastructure, overall citizen service delivery, and a lot of host of other things, why not include revenue augmentation also a part of the improvement process?
Yeah.
And in this, and as a part of this exercise, they're also building their data exchanges, their common data portals, and anonymized data sets on household utilities, utility usages, property usages, etc., could be made available for such studies, wherein startups or entrepreneurs could actually work on these data sets to deliver value back to the city. So I see a major role of the urban data exchange and the smart city data labs in this whole game.
Okay. So let's come to the technology part of it. You have already explained a bit of how drones help and how satellite mapping helps. What other technology do you feel can come into this picture, which will again help in taking you step forward in developing this process in a better way? Or if you are eyeing for certain technologies in this industry?
Yeah. So there are two facets to this whole piece. The first facet is the availability of the data.
Yeah.
So while some cities are building the data labs uh, at the smart city offices itself, some cities are yet to reach that level, and hence data infrastructure which ensures availability of seamless data is something that I would say is paramount. Start any such initiative. These data sets could be rendered through data APIs. So cities can choose to open APIs to pull up these data sets. Or even a lot of cities are creating spatial data sets, which essentially are GIS data sets with tags of a host of attributes, which would essentially provide you a 360-degree view of a particular property in the city. So those spatial data sets can also play a major role. I guess for the rest of it, the data science algorithms, AI and ML based algorithms that a company like Transurf has probably could be good enough.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of things is already being done on this level as well to facilitate this whole process of data exchange, which is easier, faster for cities, for consumers in cities, as well as, vendors for providing different services. From the national as well as state level, every state has has a different kind of purview to this whole process. So coming to one other thing is how do you see that where can government change certain things, what kind of policies can come into picture, what kind of solutions that can come into picture from I can't even say startup because I guess you guys are more than 10 years old now, but you guys are already in a space where you have been working with the government constantly throughout the inception of your company, because that this is where your solution lies. So where do you think certain things can be made more simpler for bridging this ecosystem?
Yeah. So, Puneet, coming from the experience of all these years working in this sector and working with all the kinds of cities, we work with small towns as well as large municipal corporations and including metropolitan cities as well. So, there has been a gradual shift and understanding on this aspect. And of late, we have seen like I would say in the last couple of years or so, we've seen revenue augmentation becoming a centerpiece for at least for some states in the country, where there is a mandate from the state nodal agencies to the municipal corporations to focus on revenue augmentation. So this is a positive sign, though it should have come much earlier, but it is okay and better late than never.
Yes.
So with the change in mindset, I believe that things are already on the positive side of spectrum compared to what used to happen earlier. But from a policy angle, and some of the states even try to do this, most of the municipal corporations should also strive to assign revenue enhancement targets. They can create a roadmap for, say, next 3 years or 5 years and adhere to that roadmap. Now, if they do it at a policy level, if they create that roadmap and stick to it, they are bound to explore solutions which will help them increase the tax collection. And that's where we believe that they would start looking out for innovation in this space. Stop working on, solutions with longish implementation cycles. Start looking at smarter solutions which can give them quicker ROI. So building a roadmap is I believe it can make a lot of changes. Second thing is on the data side of things, smart cities and the other cities which are not a part of that list should anyway strive to create a data center or a data hub at the city level. This will not only help in revenue augmentation exercise, but it will also help them in numerous other ways. I mean, for example, I've seen cities losing valuable geospatial and non-geospatial data sets which have been created earlier. They have lost it because they didn't have the necessary infrastructure in place, necessary mechanism in place to preserve that data and use it in the longer run for their regular day-to-day tasks. So a data infrastructure would be an on-premise system or a cloud-based system. So a lot of these governments are opening up to cloud-based solutions also these days. So they can actually come up with a system in place where the data is readily available, accessible. Also, like going forward with whatever exercise or whatever project that they work on at a city level or at a zonal level, they keep dumping data onto that system. And what I mean by that is, for example, a city comes up with a master planning exercise. And under that master plan, they are supposed to create a base map, they are supposed to create the planning maps, etc. But they might already have a base map dated, say, 5 years ago. So when they create a fresh base map, they could easily do a change detection between the two versions and arrive at the changes in the properties themselves. So they probably don't even need a third party vendor or an intervention from another organization. They could do it themselves had they got a control on their own data over time. So I believe data infrastructure and a policy roadmap, a revenue target based strict monitoring and evaluation mechanism could really help.
Okay, and which states were able to do this, and were they successful in generating more revenue enhancement targets?
Yeah. So there are many success stories. So in fact, like I mentioned earlier, the whole e-governance rollout in itself has improved the tax collection process dramatically. So there are cases wherein platforms like, for example, Digit have been deployed across several states, and there have been like huge jump in tax collection and revenues in these cities. There are states which typically have focused on revenue augmentation. There is a massive exercise which is currently going on in the state of Uttar Pradesh, where they have mandated all the 16 municipal corporations to go in for a revenue augmentation exercise. You would also see some of the smart cities, city RFPs actually mentioning revenue augmentation as one of the deliverables for the system integrator. So that is also a change in mindset that we are seeing. So compared to the RFPs that used to come say 5 years ago, we are seeing revenue augmentation as a key centerpiece RFPs which are coming in play. So yeah, so there is a shift. There is a shift in mindset, but I believe that the states can do more.
Okay. And coming to the again to the portion of property tax and willful defaulters, do you have any strategies which could be put in place to reduce the willful defaulters? Because you have been in the ecosystem, so you would know more about why certain things happen and why certain things don't. So any brief on that?
Yes, sure. So when we work with the cities and when we try to assess the problem of willful defaults, we always saw that the problem of where had plagued these cities. So what I mean by the problem of where is that I know that there is a willful default. I know how much they owe the municipality, but how do I organize my collection teams so that I extract the maximum out of their efforts when they go out in the field to collect? So I believe location intelligence can play a major role here in strategizing, how you collect the taxes in the first place. So a lot of cities actually send out tax collectors at doorstep level, especially for the willful default cases. So as a municipal commissioner, should I, like going by the 80-20 rule, I should rather target the top 20% defaulters first.
Yeah.
Now, on a map, can I see where those defaulters are? Can I do a simple route management or a logistics management simulation to help my field inspector or tax collector to follow a least cost path to collect as much as possible? So that is the technology angle to it. But yes, there is definitely there are a lot of innovative things that the cities have done in the past, especially for very large willful defaulters. So publicly naming, etc., are some of those tricks of the trade that they have followed. But that can always be the last step. You could do a lot more with technology as the initial stages of tax collection.
Okay. And with all this data and technology that comes into picture, what all other services can just be done from the same amount of data sets? Have you guys mapped any of those things?
Certainly, certainly. So when you have the property data set in place and when you build additional attribution on top of it, you can do much more. Now, let me also talk about one of the biggest problems that this typically the cities face when it comes to sanitation. Now, you would have seen that under Swachh Bharat mission, a lot of urban dwellers, specifically in slums, peri-urban areas, etc., have constructed toilets. In India, the connected sewer system coverage remains low. There are a lot of households which are still not connected to a system, a trunk connection system in place where their waste, household waste, goes directly to the treatment plant where it is treated. Instead, most of the households, and I am talking about numbers like 60% to 70% of urban households, still depend on something called an on-site sanitation. So they have septic tanks connected to their toilets. These septic tanks are very much there in their household premises. And there are typically the problem of overflowing tanks, groundwater pollution happening because of these, because these septic tanks need regular desludging, regular cleaning at specific time interval, which currently in most of the cases has been a reactive practice. So if I see a septic tank flowing, only then I would essentially call the municipality or the truck operator to clean that septic tank. So some cities are embracing a solution for doing this entire process smartly. And Transaf is one of the pioneers in implementing a smart fecal sludge management system for these kind of cities and towns. So essentially how it works is the desludging operation is partly automated in a way that there are request tickets which could be generated from the system depending on when the last desludging had happened. Plus, since there is a geospatial database already created for the cities for, say, property tax application, etc., you could use the same data set to identify the households where the desludging is required, where does the truck operator need to go, and how you optimize the vehicular movement of these night soil tankers to effectively desludge the septic tanks in the city. Some of these systems have been deployed by us in states like Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, and they have added immense value to the operational efficiency and improvement in the overall process of fecal sludge management. It also works at the other end of the spectrum, where geotagging of these trucks, vehicle tracking of these trucks has also helped cities reduce pollution. Because earlier, when it was not controlled, these trucks would just dump the waste in water bodies or nearby agriculture areas, etc. But now they are mandated to dump in the treatment plants or the fecal sludge treatment locations, etc.
Yeah.
So even that has been tracked. So the cities essentially get a complete control of their sanitation practice at a click of a button. Apart from that, they can also help themselves in improving the water supply efficiencies, leakage detection, integrating sensors to identify the water contamination in the drinking water supply, etc. So there is a host of things that the cities can do once they build a robust database, all the households which are present in the city limits.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So coming to one of the last questions that we generally ask everyone is on lines of what kind of skill sets are required in this field to grow for someone or someone who wants to enter this field. The idea is that we kind of help the young people understand how all can they come into this field or this sector if they're specifically interested in municipal revenue as one of the topics. So if I can just break it down into a much more interesting format, it would be if we have 10 people, how many people will be doing what kind of work? So 2 engineers for AIML, 2 engineers for data collection. If you can just break down something on those lines, I think it will help in understanding where is the need, what is the need for a lot of people.
Sure. So when it comes to municipal revenue augmentation tasks, typically, let me focus on the usage-based under assessment problem first. So typically, there is a project officer who would engage with the municipality and the different departments to collect the data in the first place. So that is one of the key and crucial components of this project. This is typically this happens in face-to-face meetings, so the person would really need to interact a lot and follow up a lot with these officers. Once the data is available, typically there is a team of data science experts who work on the ML operations, working on these data sets. Essentially, it starts with cleaning the data sets. So you need to do a bit of work. I'll give you an example from North Indian city where we worked. Now the property tax records were in Hindi. The electricity bill database was in English. So we had to transliterate all the property tax records into English, and then we would essentially go to match these addresses together.
Yeah.
So these are a bit of data pre-processing tasks that are typically required to be done. And once the data is ready for analysis, you typically run those algorithms. You keep on checking sample output from the output data sets. What we also do is, in order to assess the quality of the algorithm, because with every city we get a very different type of data problem. The way data is managed in every city is very different. And the discrepancies in the addresses in every city is also a bit different. We need to fine tune the algorithms. And for that, what we also do is we do a bit of ground truthing, and it's a very small sample size that we pick from different areas of the city where we send out a person with a mobile app to collect the details of the properties which we have picked from the quality analysis perspective. And using that, we again fine tune the algorithm. So again, AI and ML expertise is required there. The field expertise typically comes in from socioeconomic enumeration exercises. So people who have done that earlier, people who are familiar with map reading, who are also familiar with app-based surveys, etc., could do that task. And lastly, when the analysis is complete, there is definitely this angle of presenting the data effectively to the end user. And we are talking about municipal officers. We are talking about all the tiers of in the municipal office. So at the municipal commissioner level, the commissioner would typically be interested in the broad numbers, broad problems that the data generates. So a data analyst would typically summarize those broad areas at the commercial level, commissioner level. Coming over to the tax officers and the revenue inspectors, etc., things can get a little more granular, and you could start talking about individual property level discrepancies, showing that on an interactive dashboard where the municipal commissioner would get the overall insights, and the tax inspectors, etc., could deep dive into a particular location with color coded building footprints, etc., where they can easily locate the properties where they need to address property the revenue angle. So this is how you could actually split the typical tasks.
That was quite nicely drawn out example. I think that would quite be helpful. Thank you so much, Amarsh. If I have missed out on anything and you would like to cover that point up, happy to do that.
Yes, we have covered everything. Good that you brought up the other use cases point, because I thought we would skip the sanitation part, which is also equally important. Yeah. But I'm glad that we were able to cover that as well.
Great. So that's, I think, thank you so much. Thank you for taking out time and interacting with us. I'm sure this was quite helpful for me to understand, as well as it would be for a lot of other.
You have been listening to the U20 Dialogue series. To know more, check out our website u20india.org. Do share the dialogues with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget to follow our social media handles for more information. Stay tuned for our next dialogue.